Hi guys, welcome to Pydjango Tutorials. So this will be the second part of the project that we were working on, that is WhatsApp clone. So we were working on a personal chat application using Django and Django Channels. And as you all know, in the last video we have successfully created the basic layout of our project and the index page and the chat page of our project. So in this video we will continue from there and we will integrate Django channels using Redis as a message server, and we will also create a login page in this video so that user can log in, because right now there is no way user can log in the application. So we will create that also. So let's get started. So here we are. This is the index page of the project and this is main HTML page. Now we have to install Django channels because I do not have it installed on my virtual environment, I think. So make sure you also install Django channels, and Redis should also be installed and up and running in your Windows, Mac or whatever you are using. So make sure you install Redis also. If you don't know how to install Redis, make sure you read my blog. I'll give link to that blog in the description and you can check it out from there. And you can also get the direct link to download Redis from that blog. So let's install channels and channels Redis that we need. So we will do pip install channels and let's see if it is installed or not. No, it is not. So actually it is installing now, and once it is installed we will also install channel Redis. So let's do pip install channels Redis. Because we will be using Redis as our message broker, so we need Redis actually. Now let's come to our settings page and we have to do the basic settings for Redis server to be up and running. So right here, channel layer, open a dictionary, default, backend, channels Redis dot core dot Redis channel layer. By the way, all these things are given in the documentation, so you can read it from there also. And I'll give the link to the official documentation of the Django channels on the description. And we have to write host, and in this case host is our local host, so that will be 127.0.0.1. and next we have to give the port, and Redis server is running on 6379 port, so write that. Now also make sure to write channels on the installed apps, because channel is actually an app that we are using for our project. So make sure you write it down in the installed apps. Now we are ready to write our first consumer. So in Django channels, instead of views we write consumer, so you can think of consumer just as the counterpart for the views. And instead of matching the URL, we are using something called routes, so you can think of routes as the counterpart to the URLs. And if you want to know more about Django channels, so I'll give the link to the official documentation and some other resources, And other than that, I also have a video that you can check out, so I'll give link to that also if you want to learn more about Django channels. But before writing our first consumer, let's open this file asgi and configure it for our project. So from Django dot urls import path from channels dot routing import protocol type router URL router from channels.auth import auth middleware stack. Now let's register our consumer from that is application protocol type router websocket auth middleware stack URL router and path will be ws. Now this ws suffix we are using just to identify that this is a WebSocket path and not the normal Django request. That's why we are using ws. You can use it if you want. If you don't want, you can obviously ignore it. So it's not like mandatory to use ws, because in most of the blogs and most of the tutorials out there you will see that they are using ws, and some people actually ask that it is mandatory to write ws or not. So it is not actually, so you can obviously ignore it. Int id. Now this id I am giving here because I will be using this id in a consumer. Now we haven't created our consumer yet, so I will not register anything here. Or we can do one thing. Let's create a file consumers.py, and inside consumers.py we can import JSON, because we will need JSON from channels.generic.websocket import. We will be using async WebSocket consumer, async WebSocket consumer from channels.bb import database sync to async. Now let's create our first consumer. So I will name it as personal chat consumer, and it will be async WebSocket consumer. Let's write a function, async function actually, def connect self, and let's simply first check that this is working or not. So let's simply give it pass here, and in our ASGI file let's import this. So from chat dot consumers import personal chat consumer, and here we can write personal chat consumer. Now same as URL file here, same as URL file, we have to we also have to register our ASGI file. So let's do that, and where it is here, ASGI. So here we also have to give ASGI application, and this will be WhatsApp clone dot ASGI dot application, and let's comment this out, and let's check whether everything is working or not. So let's simply run our server. So as you can see, it is not running. It is throwing an error that cannot import ASGI application module WhatsApp clone dot ASGI, and no module named channel. Okay, it's actually channels, not channel. And in where it is showing error, in our consumer file, so it is actually channels, not channel. Let's kill the server and rerun it. So as you can see, now it is running. Now instead of normal HTTP, our project is using ASGI channels, and you can see that here. So everything is working for now actually, and if we refresh this, it is exactly running as it was earlier. So we can move on further, and you can see here that all Django channels is also handling normal HTTP requests, because when I refresh the page, this actually sends the GET request to the server, and I get the result as a 200, that is success status. Now we can proceed further. We can create our personal chat consumer for one-on-one interaction. So first I need the ID of the user who is logged in, and also the ID of the user with whom the current user is going to chat. So what do I mean by this? Let me show you. So first let's get the ID of the current user. So I'm gonna name it my ID equals to self dot scope user ID. Now this is where auth middleware stack comes into picture. If you are not using that, you cannot get the ID of the current user, because in normal or vanilla Django you are simply using request.user, but that's not the case with Django channel. So this is where this comes into picture. So you have to use auth middleware stack, and then you can also get the current user in the Django channels. Now I also want the other user ID, that is other users user ID. So other user ID. Now why do I need this? I'll explain it in a bit. First let's get that self dot scope. Now I am getting this from URL route. Now URL route is actually this route, this here. So this is the ID that I will be passing when I am actually creating the instance of the WebSocket through JavaScript. So I will pass that ID, and with self.scope URL route we can get that ID here. So this will be keyword arguments ID. Now if int my ID is greater than, please bear with me, I'll explain it in a bit. other user ID, then self dot room name equals to f string, sorry, my id dash other user id, else self dot room name other user id, my id, self dot room group name equals to chat self dot room name await. Now let's add this group, self dot channel layer dot group add self dot room group name comma self dot channel name. Now let's accept the connection, so self dot accept. Now what I'm doing here, first I'm getting the ID of the current user and the ID of the user that this current user will be chatting with. Now, so as you all know, in Django channels we have to create a room so that people who are connected to same room can interact with each other. Now in this case we have to make sure that only two people are connected to the same room, because this is going to be a personal chat application. So I'm getting their ID because ID will be unique to the user, obviously. And we also have to make sure that the room name for both the user are actually same. So let's say we got two user, and let's say for the current user ID is 1 and for the other user ID is 2. Now I'll check if my ID is greater than the other user ID, that is if 1 is greater than 2, then do this, then ID then room name will be 1-2. Otherwise, if 1 is not greater than if 1 is greater than 2 is true is false, that is it is false actually. In that case the room name will be 2-1. Now I know this is actually a lot confusing, but we have to make sure that the room name for both the user remains the same, and then only they can interact personally in a same group. So it will make much more sense when you actually see it on action. So if you don't understand it, don't worry, you will get to know what is happening actually. So we can actually proceed further, so don't worry if you're not understanding it, because eventually you will understand it later. Now let's also create a disconnect method, def disconnect self code self dot channel layer group discard self dot room group name self dot channel layer. Now let's actually create the instance of the WebSocket through JavaScript. So in our static folder we will create another folder named JS, and inside JS we will create a file chat.js. Now before chat.js, in our main.html file, let me open views.py file first. Here it is. In our views.py we also have to get the username, because that's how we will be getting the user ID of the user with whom the current user will be chatting. So this is how we will be getting the other user ID. So let's open our urls.py file, and instead of chat we can use str username user object by user dot objects dot get objects dot get, and username will be username. So let me show you what I've just done. And before that, in our index page, here in href, remember last time we have deleted this chat URL, if you can remember. So that's what we are doing right now. So in URLs we have given the name chat actually, so this will be chat. Sorry, URL chat, and username equals to user dot username. Now if I show you in live action, oh I forgot we don't have to use this here, so sorry for this. Now let me show you once again. So as you can see, when I click on this, I get this Anshu user, that is whoever the current logged in user is actually chatting to Anshu. Now if I click on Joshua, oh we haven't given that URL mapping here, so let's give it on our chat page also. Let's copy it from here, and in our where do I have to give this? Here where it is hash, I have to paste this. Now if I refresh this, now if I click on Joshua, so the current user is actually chatting to Joshua. Now let me just log in by .0.1 port 8000, and now as you can see I'm logged in with the super user, that is Anshu, so that's why Anshu is not showing here. Now if I open this, let's say Rohit, so as you can see Anshu is written here, and now Anshu is actually interacting with Rohit, and same is the case with Joshua. Now Anshu is actually interacting with Joshua, and also we have to change this name here. We have to write the name of the person with whom we are chatting actually. So let's do that also now only. You can see here it will not be request.user.name, it will be user.username. Let's refresh this. No change. we are actually sending users. Oh, actually we are not sending user object. Oh, that's why. This will be user obj. Now if I run the server, so here you can see this is Joshua, and now this has to be Anshu actually. So let's see where is the error. In our oh, we haven't saved this page, so let's save this. Now you can see, now Anshu is actually chatting with Joshua. If I open this page, Anshu is actually chatting with Sarah, and if I open this page, Anshu is actually chatting with Rohit. Now it is working absolutely fine. So let's establish our WebSocket connection and proceed further. So in our chat.js file, we need a ID of the user, that is other user ID. That is, if we are on this page, then I need the ID of the Joshua. If I am on this page, then I need the ID of the Sarah. If I'm on this page, then I need the ID of the Rohit. That is, with whom we are actually chatting, I need the ID of that user. So let's get that. And as you can see in the last, I have already pasted this here. So user ID JSON, this is actually JSON script, and the ID is JSON username. Now this is actually Django short form, you can say. Now let me show you what is actually this. Now if I, let's say, open the source page of this, wait a minute, I haven't refreshed this. Once again open that. Now here you can see that ID is actually JSON username and the value is 4. Same with the message username, JSON message username, and the name is Anshu. We will be using it later, but for now we need only this. And how we can get that? For that, all we have to do in our chat page, we have to write JSON dot parse document dot get element by ID JSON username dot text content. That's what we need. And this username, this is actually the ID that we have given here, this JSON username. That's what we are using here. So in case of Rohit, I will get 4 here. In case of Joshua, I'll get some other user ID. Now we also need message username, that is the username of the person who is sending the message. So message username, you can use the word sender username, JSON dot parse document dot get element by ID. This is JSON message username, I think. JSON message username, and in this case also we need the text content. Now let's establish the connection. So const socket equals to new web socket and we have to make the connection to this same URL, that is this URL or this route actually. So this will be ws plus window dot location dot host plus ws, that is this ws, and next we have to give the id, so plus id, and plus there is also actually a slash here, so we have to append this slash also. Let's paste, let's end this statement. Now we have to open the connection, so socket dot on open. What do we want to, or what do we want to happen when the connection is open? So function, and now simply log the log that connection established socket dot on close function. Let's log connection lost socket dot on error, that is if error occurred during connection, log e, that is the error, and socket dot on message log print the message. So that's all we have to do, and now we can test this out by going to the same route, but we have to integrate this JavaScript file to our main chat page. So this will be script static js slash chat.js. Now we can test this out. Let's go to our page, let's inspect it. Now let's refresh this and test this out. So you can see that we get the error, that is connection actually failed, but our consumer is actually working, and we are getting connection lost. And what is the error actually? So eventually guys, the problem was that this has to be channel layers and not channel layer, so we have to put s here, channel layers. And now save this and rerun the server. Now if I go and check this again and refresh this, as you can see, we get a message that connection established, that is connection is established successfully, and we also get the data, that is our room group name, chat 2-1. That's what we have done in our consumer. Here you can see we are sending our room group name, that is this room group name, and that's what we are getting in our console, chat 2-1, where 2 is the ID of one user and 1 is the ID of another user. So that's it for this video. In the next video we will try to implement messages, and where user can send messages when clicking this button. So, and we will also try to create login page in the next video if possible. So thank you for watching this video, and please guys do like, share and subscribe, and press the bell notification so that you can get the notification for the next video of this tutorial, and bookmark this playlist if you want. Thank you so much for watching.